This podcast is sponsored by Xgrowth. Xgrowth is the APAC ABM agency. If you and your organization are looking to land and expand enterprise and mid-market deals, Xgrowth is the agency to help. Xgrowth works with a wide range of international and global technology vendors, service providers, and B2B SaaS companies. If this sounds like something you're interested to know more about, make sure to check out Xgrowth at xgrowth.com.au. That's xgrowth.com.au and chat with the APAC ABM agency.
What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shane Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Andrea Clatworthy, Global Head of Account-Based Marketing at Fujitsu, about pipeline acceleration and deal-based marketing. Now, this is quite a hot topic, especially now where a lot of organizations are looking at expanding their customers and diving deeper in terms of the customers that they currently have and deals that they have in the pipeline. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with Andrea. Andrea is a superstar in the ABM world, so I am very much looking forward to this chat. Andrea, thanks for joining us.
Shane, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having a chat.
Same here. I'm super excited for this chat, and I think what will be really good is if we could define deal-based marketing or DBM for people who are listening. I'd love to hear your definition of what deal-based marketing is.
Cool. It's a really good question, and people often ask me this. So if you think about ABM, which we're all familiar with, so account-based marketing is about a marketeer working really closely with the sales team. This is in one-to-one ABM to deepen relationships and grow with that account. So deepen relationships, think about how do you position, what's your reputation, and the revenue will follow, right? So that's about working with your timescales, thinking about what stories do you want to take to that customer to achieve those objectives. So very much your timescales. Now, deal-based marketing is working to the customer's timescales. So they've probably already worked out what they want to buy. So in theory, they would have issued an RFP or something similar in our industry anyway. So they're quite a lot further down the buying journey. So deal-based marketing is about still working really closely with the account team or the sales team or the pursuit team, whatever you want to call them, to convince the customer to choose you. They've already made a choice that they want to do whatever it is they're trying to do. They need to buy something to help them achieve a business objective of theirs. And deal-based marketing is about encouraging, persuading, if you like, that they're going to choose you above the competition. And it's working to their timescale. So if they've issued an RFP, request for proposal, then they've probably put a timescale in there. So you're working to their timescale, not to yours.
Got it. Okay. And Andrea, what situation does it make sense to implement deal-based marketing?
Yeah, it's not right for every situation. So the way we think about it here is that when it's a large deal, and that might be large from our perspective or large from the customer's perspective, or it's strategic or it's super important, and the numbers stack up, then it's worth deploying DBM. So when wouldn't you use it is sometimes an easier way to think about it. So if, for instance, the value of the deal is, 100K, okay? And you know as an experienced marketeer that you've got to at least spend 20K to do some really good, meaningful marketing and marketing communications to help win that deal. Then that might be the entire margin from that deal, 20K on a 100K deal.
Yeah.
So would you do it? Well, there you go. Then you need to make a judgment call, right? So if that little deal could then be the gateway to much more, and you really want to win that customer, maybe they're a new customer, then maybe you take the hit on that. But if it isn't, if this is run rate stuff, or it's an existing customer, then you probably think twice before making that kind of investment. So I think some of it's around those commercial decisions, and some of it will be around what's going on in the world of the customer and how important that customer is to you.
Interesting. Do you have like when looking at DBM, do you have like a decision-making matrix that you go through, and there are certain criteria that they would have certain weights associated to them to whether qualify for DBM in the organization or not? Because I would imagine all pursuit team is going to be like, I want DBM for this thing. When can we start, right? Do you have that model in place?
Yeah, we kind of do. And there's some real key things that we'll have a discussion with the account team or the pursuit team. Where are we in that buying journey? If RFP submission is like next week, then, well, there's only so much you can do, right? So have you got time to create the story? Have you got time to think through the narrative? Have you got time to identify the decision makers and work out how you're going to reach them? So there's a time factor here, which is a really important one. The other thing, that commercial piece is really important too. We get around that here by, so for ABM, marketing, take that cost generally. But for DBM, we're really clear that that's a cost of sale. So the pursuit team have got to cover that cost. So that's a decision they need to make in terms of, do we want to make this investment for the cost of sale? Are we going to erode all of our margin? Back to that chestnut, really. Some of the other things to think through is, can we resource it? It's quite important. And where are we on qualification? So if we think perhaps we're column fodder, which is very rare these days, then why would we put our precious time and effort into working on that when actually perhaps there's more attractive or more other deals that have got a higher percentage of us winning? So there's some judgment call that has to take place. In the same way that salespeople or sales leadership would make a judgment call on which deals to take to bid, then where we do a similar process for DBM.
From a timeline perspective, what do you think is the minimum doable time from your experience? Like what is it that you like, if it's under this, I'm not touching this? Is there a time frame that you usually have in mind that's a massive red flag?
Yeah, I mean that next week RFP submission thing that's a no really. But it's not just that submission. So if you think about the buying journey that a customer go through, there'd be several stages in an RFP process. And if it's a very long process, and sometimes can be 1 or 2 years, then deploying DBM in those scenarios is probably really sensible, because you want to continue to be front of mind with that customer so they choose you. So there's a few things to think about then. So let's go back to the RFP submission next week. Perhaps that's the first stage, and really the team are trying to get on the shortlist maybe. That's risky to do that. But then if the process after that is 6 months or something, then you would consider that for DBM. What we normally do is we look at where we are in our sales stage processes. So we have a 1 to 7 sales stage model, and 7 is won or lost, it's 11. So if and 6 is close the deal, 5 is is bid. So if we're at 3 or 4, where we're either in pre-qualification or we've qualified it and we're making in that initial investment, then that's a really good time to engage. Part of DBM is about shaping the story. And if the story's already set in stone, the team have already really clear what they're doing and they're just going for it, then the opportunity to influence that story is probably minimal. And then you have to think about, well, what's viable? What can we actually do? So asking questions like, do we know all the decision makers in that buyer group? Have we got relationships with them already? And perhaps if we don't, then deal-based marketing can help there. So we can help identify who those decision makers are and start the communication process to create those relationships with those people. Back to this, everyone's got a choice. Some people will have a preference on which suppliers that they might choose based upon history or bias or whatever. So convincing them that actually you've got the best possible solution for them in their company, and they should choose you, it is achievable with DBM. But there's loads of factors. It's not a yes/no kind of thing. There's kind of degrees of grey, if you like.
Andrea, you've mentioned narrative and building the story a couple of times now. Can you unpack that a little bit, and in terms of like, what do you mean by that?
It's really, in tech, which is where I work, it's really common that we'd be presenting a solution to a business problem in pure technical terms. But actually, most human beings, regardless of whether they're buying for their company or buying for themselves, will additionally have some emotive part of their decision making. So if you build a story that isn't just, this is the tech we've got, Mr. Customer, but this is how we can help you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, achieve your business objectives, and this is perhaps how it will make you feel, bringing that emotion into it, bringing the real business benefit of partnering with us rather than anyone else. And that's not just describing the technical solution that you're going to deliver, that's describing what great looks like, what great feels like, what will be different after they've bought from you and you've deployed with them whatever it is they're buying. So it's just turning it around just a little bit. So we're thinking much more of the business benefits, the language of great, rather than the language of technical.
And Andrea, what do you usually find is the input to that? Mm-hmm. Like where do you get the input in order to create that story / narrative?
Yeah, some of it will be in their RFP. So it's definitely worth reading that, right? They've put a lot of effort into creating that document, and quite often they'll have some of that background and that, this is why we're doing it type stuff. It's really easy to forget that. Other sources of information will be publicly available stuff. So what's the company's strategy? And can you work out where whatever it is they're buying is contributing to achieving that strategy? So then you're thinking about what are the imperatives and the initiatives that the customers put in place. And it might be, their sustainability agenda. It might be how do they improve customer experience for their customers. It might be how do they improve employee experience for their employees. So thinking about the end objective enables you to craft that story so that you're addressing that rather than features and benefits of what you've got. You can ask the customer. Quite often there'll be dialogue in the deal process. Ask them, human beings. Take that first party insight, if you like. Where the account team, the pursuit team are having dialogue with the customer. Make sure they ask those questions. Why? Why are you buying it? What are you trying to achieve? And then you can weave that back into the story that you're creating.
Very interesting. Okay, so that's the input of it, and then you create the narrative. Let's talk about the outcome, which I'm guessing it becomes more tactical in terms of you've now built the narrative. Mm-hmm. What is the outcome from there, and what shape and form can DBM take from a tactical perspective?
Yeah, so you've created the narrative, you've got your messaging house, you've got your value proposition, so you're clear on what messages you want to land with the decision makers. So then I touched on this already. Identify who those decision makers are, and work out where your relationship is with them. Are they neutral? Are they advocates? Are they negative about you? And then you need to target those individuals with your marketing communications. Now, how do you do that? To answer your question, what are the tactics? Just think about the entire marketing mix, the toolbox at your disposal. Use everything. Use above the line, below the line, through the line. Make it up if you need to, but get your message in front of those people. So you can think about all of those marketing tactics, and then not forgetting that you've got this great communication channel, which is your deal team. So your human beings from your company talking to their human beings. So they're part of this. They're part of the communication channel to land those messages with those key people. So if you're doing that in a really joined up, omni-channel, integrated way, then the chances of success are higher. Chances of your customer or prospect starting to understand the value that you're bringing by you delivering that story are much higher. So tactically, everything.
Leverage
single
anything.
tactic.
Yeah, just get that message in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes you would have created content and created engagement opportunities. And other times you might be leveraging what you've already got in play. So for instance, supposing you are sponsoring, I don't know, a third party event. Let's think of a big one, I don't know, that most people know. Mobile World Congress perhaps, which moves around. Or it's in Barcelona, doesn't matter where it is. If you're going to be there and you know your customer's going to be there because you've done the insight and you understand that, and perhaps you've invited them to be there, then in that invitation process, make sure your messages are woven in to the invites, be that email or however else you're going to invite them. And then once they're there, make sure you're landing that message again. And that might be through the conversation, or perhaps it's how you've got your stand or your space messaged. And then the follow-up process, land the message again. So you've hit them with the same message consistently at least 3 times through that process. And you may have already decided to be at that event, so there's no additional cost. So you're leveraging what you already have. Does that make sense?
I love that. It does. It does make sense. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen marketers make with deal-based marketing?
That's a really good question. I think there's some bear traps to look out for. If the deal is in the public sector, so into a government organisation, quite often there'll be rules about how you can market to them when you're in that buying process. So if that in the scenario that you're working in, the customer's really clear, do not market to us during this period, and you do, then you could find yourself out of the running. So there's little things like that to look out for. Sometimes a customer will tell you, do not, even if they're not in the public sector, do not overtly market to me. So then you've got to think about, well, how do I land my messages indirectly? So a big mistake would be just using email, because that's a direct communication. If you decide that email is going to be your primary channel, and it might be, that's okay, then make sure the email's coming from whoever the relationship holder is with that customer, not from marketing, but from that person who's being coached by the customer through the buying process, or is the prime person who's engaging with the customer. Make it about building that relationship between your human being and their human being.
Interesting. What are some of the channels that you've used for kind of getting that message indirectly in front of the customer? What comes to mind?
Yeah. So there's a really lovely one that you can do. So if it's an existing customer, then if you go through that almost an advocacy process where perhaps you'd create a case study on what you've done in the past, and then you do that with the customer, right? And then of course they need to get it approved. So then there'll be some circulation of that case study amongst people that need to make use of it. And you're reminding them then that you're awesome and you've got an existing partnership. And you can start to suddenly land some forward-looking messages in there. So it's direct communication, but it's a process that you're working through to create a piece of content. So you're not marketing them about whatever it is that you're discussing with them in that buying process. You're reminding them of what you've done in the past and how good the future could feel. So that's one way to do it. Other indirect stuff, do some PR, getting your message out there in publications that they naturally read. So you're turning up where they already are. That's a really good way of doing it. And events is a good one to do that on it too. Things to avoid, perhaps you wouldn't do tons of paid media that directly targets them. That's very obvious, isn't it? And people start seeing your message everywhere, then they're going to go, I'm being overtly marketed to. It could change their opinion of you, and that's what you don't want. You don't want to make the buying process more difficult. You don't want to make the choice more difficult. You want them to naturally go, these guys know what they're talking about. I'm loving what they've done in the past. And maybe they've seen some great case studies that you've pushed out there gently, throughout your channels. I think just using all of those possible tactics that you can think of that are not about directly communicating with them is a good way to think of it. And actually, I've talked about omni-channel and integrated. That's the way to think about what a deal-based marketing campaign plan could look like. As many channels as you can think of, orchestrated, without bombarding your customer or your prospect.
Andrea, is there any difference? You talked about how there are 7 stages in the sales process and how it starts to really, DBMs start to really apply in stage 3, 4, and onwards. Are there any differences that are very clear and must be taken into consideration in terms of how you approach a deal based on these different stages?
Not really.
So it's consistent across.
Yeah. You might want to change the story slightly. If you're going to follow a model that kind of goes epiphany, awareness, decision, purchase. Well, actually, because where the customer is, they've already made a decision, to purchase. So what you need to do is persuade them to choose you. So you could devise a content journey that starts with why, what great looks like for the customer in the future, and then perhaps a whole load of references. So that's one way to think about doing it. I think some of the big differences are the closer you move towards decision, you'll typically have a lot more direct communication between the pursuit team and the customer. So you'd be thinking about what does that look like when they physically do that? What communication materials are they using? So do you create, and the answer is probably yes, some consistent branded PowerPoint templates, for example, or some nice leave behinds or something like that. So really, really tactical, tangible stuff, but to ensure that you're delivering the consistent story at every single checkpoint. What does the RFP response look like? Are you being consistent in the language that you're using, in the imagery that you're using, the visual identity you've chosen to put together for this DBM? So think about that. So some of the key differences around between DBM and mass marketing is that for DBM, you're probably marketing to, 20 people. How many people in a decision-making unit, right? It's between 5 and 20. So you're not doing mass stuff. So you can give yourself permission to create things especially for those people, which means that you're probably not going to be doing broadcast advertising at that point, because you want to land this message, very specific message, around what it is they're trying to buy with those particular people. So you probably wouldn't be doing mass stuff at that point. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm curious, Andrea, how deep have you gone with personalization with DBM? Now, I understand some, just like you said, some situations maybe it's a little bit trickier, especially with government and organizations who are like, don't market to me. But how in situations that hasn't been the case, I'm super curious of like hearing examples or that you've gone just all the way in on personalization. What comes to mind?
I've got a couple to share actually. So both are a few years old, so I'm not breaking any commercial confidences. There was a particular person in an organisation that was very senior, and we just couldn't get to them because they were that senior. Where they lived was a public record, so I worked out how they physically got to the office. So what was their journey? And they worked in central London. Everyone gets public transport in central London, especially where their office was based. So I worked out the route that they would have taken. And if you commute, when you get to the tube station, you have an optimal route that you'll take through the tube station, because typically there's multiple exits, there's multiple escalators, and there's multiple opportunities to advertise. So I just talked about not broadcasting, but in this particular example, the only way I could get to them was by advertising alongside the escalator that I knew they would get, because that was the optimal route from the train to the exit and then to their office. So that's like extreme stalking, right? So that's one example. Could be careful, extreme stalking, but it seems to work in that.
So did you have like ads up right there? And what were the ads were just saying, hey, like Fujitsu, and this is like the vision, and it was part of the story? Or was it even more direct and be like, we're trying to reach you, pick up the phone, or something like that?
No, it was part of the story.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, it had to be. So that was a stalking version for somebody we couldn't get to. Completely different scenario. Somebody that we knew very well, existing customer, but they didn't like us and had said, this is in a renewal scenario, they had said, there is no way I'm renewing with Fujitsu. Right, so there's a clear message there that person is a detractor, whatever else you want to label it, detractor. And they're a key decision maker. So we knew we had to change the perception of us with that person so that they would choose us. And we wanted them to have a positive opinion of us. So we worked really hard to create a narrative especially for that person, but then multiple engagement opportunities for that person to tell their story enabled by us. So we knew that person was very proud of the work they'd done. They had a little bit of an ego, not a massive one, but enough of an ego that they would be happy to take public stage, if you like. And we worked with them on a number of things so that we could enable that person to tell their story. So I'm using careful language here because I don't want to declare who it is. So for instance, in Europe, the FT, Financial Times, is a big publication. We managed to get an interview with the FT for that person, so they're in print, right? We helped them, or did it for them, enter a whole load of awards, so that and through that story, right, where we're telling their story, but we're telling the story of us helping them. So we're back to that case study example I was talking about before. We're reminding them of the great work that we've done in the past, and we're saying to them through this process, we really value you so much that we're willing to go the extra mile so that your profile is heightened in the market. So tons of stuff like that, so personalised, so bespoke, just for that person. And it worked. It wasn't a quick fix, it took more than a week, and it worked. So that person is an advocate, we achieved the renewal, we've got a very happy customer.
I feel like Fujitsu became that personal PR agency for that.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. And Andrea, for some people who are listening, for their reference, what is and I'm not asking specifically for this situation, but can you give a little bit of context in terms of like, what is the average contract side of Fujitsu's deals? Now, I know some of them are public, and it's available, but just for people to have context, and we can talk about ranges, whatever we're comfortable. What are we talking about in terms of like looking at these deals that allows for something like this to be possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's back to the commercial bit, right? So typically between 5 and 200 million.
Got it. And I think that like really succinctly creates the perspective of what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So if a deal is smaller, then any money you spend, part of the buying process, will erode your margin significantly. So you do need to make those judgment calls.
Absolutely.
People often ask me, well, so how much should you spend? It depends, right? It depends what you need to do. So if we talk about that scenario I was just talking about to change perception for one person, that didn't really cost anything, but it cost us a lot of effort. So there are things you can do that don't cost a lot. If you need to create a ton of content, that's going to cost. So you need to think very carefully how much you want to spend. If you need to specifically, sponsor an exhibition or a conference or something, that's going to cost you a ton of money, right? So back to that example before, leveraging what you've already got is a good thing. There is a rule of thumb that I've seen somewhere. It's 0.01% of the contract value. You can use a benchmark figure if you like. Personally, it's about building it bottom up. What do we need to do? What are the objectives? And therefore, what's our suggested marketing communications plan to achieve those objectives? And how much do we want to spend on it?
Got it. So did you say the rule of thumb that you've heard is 0.01%?
Yeah, I don't believe that.
That sounds small. It sounds very of a deal.
Yeah. Well, if it's a £200 million deal, then that's a meaningful amount, isn't it?
Correct.
But if it's a £5 million deal, then a bit tight.
It is a bit tight, isn't it?
Yeah. This is about, how much money does it cost to do something meaningful?
Absolutely. And I think it also depends on business model. If you're in the services space, you have different profit margins versus, if you're in a SaaS space and you're selling, licenses and so on and so forth. So that creates great context. Andrea, we've covered a whole range of stuff. We talked about from definitions of where to use and not to use the EBM, talked about examples and tactics. I have some rapid fire questions that I want to ask you, but before I do so, is there anything else that you think we should cover that you think maybe I didn't ask? It's very crucial with regards to deal-based marketing that we didn't touch on?
I think one of the things is about having the relationship and working closely with the pursuit team. So it's really important that the marketeer isn't seen as the bag carrier, that the marketeer has a place at the table. They are the marketeer, they are the marketing expert, and what they're not there to do is to pander to every marketing whim of the pursuit team. Pursuit team might have a view, which is great, but they're experts in selling. Marketeer is the expert in marketing. So I think being able to position correctly and having the right relationship with that team is really important. So people say, well, how do you do that? Well, it's about how you position at the start of the process. And then it's about the cadence that you put in terms of, having a regular Friday call, I don't know, whatever it is, but the marketeer being part of that selling process properly and not being an add-on on the side. Oh yeah, we need some penned PowerPoints and parties. No, you don't. This is a strategic approach. This is about creating a narrative. This is about changing or moving the dial on those decision makers' perception of you so that they choose you. And that's, although you end up doing a ton of tactics to achieve that, it's a strategic approach. So that relationship with human beings internally is really important.
Andrea, that creates another question in my mind. If a marketer is getting involved and doing deal-based marketing, what do you think is that really critical skill that the marketer needs to have? Because marketers come from different backgrounds, right? They come from, some of them are technical, some of them are copywriter and comms, some come from strategy. What do you think is that number one or the two most critical skills that a marketer who's working on a DBM needs to have and if they don't, it's very risky and it's going to be an uphill battle?
I think some of it's around asking the right questions. And so a question could be as simple as, do we know the decision makers? And quite often I've asked that question and the team will kind of look at me like, well, how can you ask such a hard question? Well, it's a genuine one. And you're going to make them think in that scenario. If it's kind of, you get a puzzled face and the answer is, actually, it's a good point, we don't, then you've instantly proven value just by asking that question. Yeah. And then you say, well, what are we going to do about it? And you might work on that together, and that's okay. But it's asking those hard questions. Another good question is, do we understand why the customer's choosing to buy what they're buying? And if we don't, then we need to work that out so that we can create the right narrative.
I appreciate that.
Have you read the State of ABM and APAC report yet? If you have, you'll know that 59% of marketing leaders are intending to increase their ABM investment in the coming year. Even bigger news is 0% of survey respondents are going to decrease their investment. It's an exciting time for ABM in the region. Discover the state of account-based marketing in APAC today. Download the full report at abm.xgrowth.com.au/report. That's abm.xgrowth.com.au/report.
Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So the first question that I want to ask is, what is one book, one resource? It could be a book, a blog, a video, a podcast, whatever it is, that has had a profound and fundamental impact on the way that you work or you live.
There's a really good book. This is a work context book by an author who's fantastic called Bev Burgess. Now, Bev Burgess, she's written 3 books, I think now. And there's a good book called I've got it here actually, The Practitioner's Guide to Account-Based Marketing. It's in its 2nd edition and it's terrific. It's written as a practitioner's guide. And I dip in and out of this book frequently, and I recommend it quite a lot. And I've had lots of salespeople read it because if they want to understand ABM so that they can better make use of it, which is great. So when you've got your sellers, your salespeople embracing the concepts of account-based marketing or deal-based marketing in this context, then you're in heaven, really. So I recommend that book. So Bev Burgess, A Practitioner's Guide to Account-Based Marketing.
Bev's content is great, and
she's just terrific.
I know she's just released her new book, and actually it just arrived today for me. So account-based growth. There we go. You got it somewhere as well.
Yeah, there we go. That one. Yeah,
I love it. So looking forward to in the break to go through that. Thanks for that. Okay, question number 2 is, if you could give one advice to B2B marketers, what would that be?
Learn the language of sales.
I love how it's short and succinct. Question number 3, who are some of the influencers? I mean, we talked about Bev, but who are some of the influencers that you follow in the sales and marketing space?
So, there's a group called ACAM, Association of Key Account Managers, and I get involved with them now and then. But they have some good thinkers. You notice that's about key account management, so that's selling basically, but managing the relationship with your customer. And ABM is about managing your relationship with your customer. So there's some really strong similarities. Though I'd recommend, if anyone else is thinking about where do I get my sales knowledge from, they're a good place to go to. So a great resource, I think, for anyone is the agency and supplier ecosystem. Some great thought leadership coming out from agencies and sharing best practice, case studies, etc. Really good place to go. I'm really lucky that for the last few years I've been a judge for the B2B Marketing Awards. So you get to see some great content that people are so proud of that they've submitted it for an award. So very lucky in that regard.
Love it. I love it. Bev, last question is, what is something that excites you about B2B today?
I'm really excited about the concept of using things like AI in the future. I think there's some awesome opportunities, especially when we're thinking about data-driven. That artificial intelligence has got a role to play. And if we get that right and the AI's telling us next best action or creating some content or whatever it may be that you want the outcome to be, that means as marketeers we've got more time to think strategically, to be creative, and worry a bit less about those things that just need to turn the handle on. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also really excited and encouraged that B2B marketing is starting to give itself permission to be less boring, to be less formal, to recognise that although we call it business to business, it's still human being to human being. So recognising that people have got emotions and biases and needs and being able to respond to those, but still in a B2B context because they're buying on behalf of their company, but bringing some of that B2C stuff, if you like, into the B2B world.
Andrea, this has been an awesome conversation. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. I've learned tons from just this conversation that we've had. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to feel the same thing. So thank you so much for your time. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.